Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my cabin down by the creek. So I wanted to talk today about the election and what happens afterwards. So everyone knows that Tuesday is the big election day where we decide the leadership for our country, our state, and our local governments. And this election is probably the most important election potentially since 1860. So there has never been a time since the last Civil War that the American people have been so divided. And so there are two distinct pathways that our country will take depending on who we elect as president. So pathway number one is my favorite pathway. The one I prefer is if Trump wins. If Trump wins the White House, if he is able to win by such a high margin that the cheating and the ballot stealing and all of the fraud of this election won't be enough to overcome the sheer mass numbers of people who come out to vote for Donald Trump. And by some miracle, he manages to hold on to the White House for another 4 years. Excuse me. This is what I think will happen. I believe that if Trump wins, immediately upon the realization that Trump has won, and possibly even before then, possibly just starting November 3rd or November 4th. What did they say? November 4, it begins. They said that 3 years ago. Were they talking about November 4, 2017? Or were they talking about November 4, 2020? Dun, dun, dun. What if that was a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen now on the day after the election of November 3rd? So I expect to see the riots and the demonstrations and the insanity in our streets in cities around the country, and especially in Washington, D.C., to be accelerated off the hook and probably a new bizarre low in the behavior of people, that we could see even greater, more widespread destruction. It could bleed over even more than it has into residential neighborhoods and the suburbs, as it were. And this is going to continue. I believe if Trump wins, that the opposition representing Joe Biden and the Democrats, headed up by Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris and a list of other deplorable characters. Hey, they called us that. We can call them right back. You're deplorable as well. What did Biden call us today? Called Trump supporters evil folks? Was it evil folks? Ugly folks. He called us ugly folks and chumps. So, yeah, there'll be a host of deplorables on the Democratic Party working to contend the election. They intend to challenge the election. They intend to use the same voter fraud that they tried to use to overthrow Trump to blame Trump. They're going to spin it. This is what they do. They take the truth, flip it on its head. So they are cheating like crazy to try to stop the chance of Trump winning. And if Trump by some miracle wins, they're going to take that same evidence and claim it was him that cheated and he's the illegitimate president. And they'll declare Joe Biden and Kamala Harris our new presidents, and they'll have an inauguration on January 20th in San Francisco, inaugurating their president. And the United States, not unlike the Catholic Church right now, will have two leaders. You know, the Catholics have two popes because Pope Benedict is still alive. But that's another video. The fact of the matter is, it looks like we may end up having two presidents if Trump wins, because they're not going to accept the results of the election. And they've said as much. This part is not conjecture. Hillary Clinton has instructed Joe Biden and the Democrat Party not to concede the election under any circumstances. So one would assume any circumstances means even if they lose by a landslide, they're still not going to concede the election, and they're going to contend the election, and they are going to try to unseat Donald Trump. And if that fails, they will just simply elect their own president and more or less secede from the Union in that way. Well, they won't call it seceding from the Union. They will call it, they will say that they have the legitimate presidency and that they're just moving the capital to San Francisco, and that it's Trump that's the one that is, not the valid president. So this is one of the scarier things to think about, because I'm guessing on how it might go down. And it could open up the door for a much larger war. And that could involve foreign countries. It could involve the United Nations. It can involve a Chinese invasion. I've talked about this before, that if Washington and Oregon and California inaugurated their own president, declared basically that they're the legitimate government, they could seek help from foreign entities like China and invite them right into the ports to assist them in fending off any attempt by Donald Trump to hold the Union together and to preserve the United States and its integrity as a nation. So that's frightening, because that brings us right up to World War III, nuclear exchanges, foreign troops on U.S. soil. So that's what I think will happen if Donald Trump wins. So what will happen if Joe Biden wins? If Joe Biden wins, there's really two pathways. One pathway is if we with Donald Trump accept it and don't challenge it, and there is a peaceful transfer of power, it'll go one way. And it'll go another way if Donald Trump and the patriots backing him decide that we have enough proof that the election was rigged and that there was election fraud. Then we might decide to just go ahead and stubbornly hold the presidency anyway, at which point they would still inaugurate Biden and everything I talked about would go forward. But there might also be a military assault on the White House to try to remove Donald Trump physically from the White House, to physically put Joe Biden in. If the fact of the matter is, it should go to the courts. If we can't agree on the election, it should go to the courts, go to the Supreme Court, and be settled before the January 20th inauguration day. Really, before the certification of the election day, it should be taken care of, one way or the other. If we, Donald Trump's people, the deplorables, the original deplorables, if we decide to challenge the election, we will let it go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will rule, and it will be done as far as we're concerned. The left won't do that. They'll just go right around that court. They'll declare the Supreme Court to be, if they lose the case, they'll declare the Supreme Court to be invalid, because they'll accuse Trump of stacking the court, even though there is no proof of that. He followed the Constitution. We, the Republicans, followed the Constitution in the Amy Coney Barrett installation into the Supreme Court, and any challenge to that is futile and retarded, if you want to know the truth. It's crispy clear. Donald Trump did what he was allowed to do under the Constitution in appointing her to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court will rule, and we will recognize it, but I do not believe that the Democrats will. The other possibility is that Biden wins and we don't challenge the election, and then America will go on and it'll seem normal until after the inauguration. And then at that point, I believe if you go back to the debates for the Democratic nomination, Kamala Harris was debating Joe Biden, and most of the progressives on the stage were calling for gun confiscations, for calling of the rounding up of AR-15s and AK-47s, and the seizure of private property by the federal government for the safety of the people. Okay? We all know what that's about. We all know that's to prevent us from ever being able to stand up to them in the future. They don't want the people to have the power to stand up to the government. They want to put the guns in the hands of the government so the people no longer have the power to defend their own republic. And that if that happens, then we're just plebes. We're just servants. We're just serfs to the king. We're not noblemen anymore. We're not citizens anymore. We're just, slaves. A man without a gun is a slave. That's my opinion. But at any rate, if Biden wins and takes office within a year, Kamala Harris will convince him of what they talked about during the debate. During the debate, Biden was actually saying, look, guys, you can't go and take those people's guns. They have a Second Amendment right. You can't confiscate guns. And Kamala Harris looks at him on the debate stage and she says, and I quote, "Come on, Joe. Just say yes we can. Yes we can. Yes we can take all the guns. Just say yes we can." That's parroting, of course, the Joe Biden, Barack Obama slogan from the 2008 and 2012 election. Yes we can. And Kamala Harris says, yes we can take your guns. Yes we can take your rifles. When that happens, I predict that the people on the right, and I can't speak for everyone, but if you come for my guns, I will fight you. It is my right as an American. I have the right to defend my home. I have the right to defend the Constitution. I have the right to defend myself and my rights and my family, and I will. End of story. When it comes to me and my house, what happens out here in the middle of nowhere. Well, it's like my neighbors told me when I moved out here. When I moved out here, my Oklahoma neighbors, knowing I was kind of a vagabond and a wandering sage, as it were, pulled me to the side and said, hey, we don't call 911 around here. So don't screw up, because we don't call the police. We call our buddy with the backhoe. I've since learned there is a buddy with the backhoe, and he lives just right up there. You can see his backhoe. So this is the kind of country where revenuers would come down here looking for stills and never show up again back in the day of Prohibition. And so I don't reckon the people around here in the state of Oklahoma are going to turn their guns over like the Canadians did. We're not going to turn our guns over like the Australians did. We're not just going to let them make I remember seeing giant piles of all kinds of firearms being picked up by a big crane and dropped into a refining fire at a smelt at a steel mill. They dropped them into this burning 3,000 degree temperature fire, and they just melted these by the crane armload full. There was a pile of guns up to the mountains. It's huge mountain of guns. And I remember watching them melting them down when people turned in their guns in Australia. Americans aren't ever going to do that. Oklahomans aren't going to do that. I don't reckon Texans are going to do that. I don't think folks in West Virginia are going to do that. I don't reckon folks in the mountains of Oregon and Eastern Oregon are going to do that without a fight. Based on the people I know. So if Biden wins and Trump steps aside and we have a Biden presidency, Kamala will convince him, yes, we can, and war will start. When she says, yes, we can, she says, yes, we can destroy all the Trump supporters. Yes, we can start a war and an international conflagration. Yes, we can destabilize the strongest superpower on the face of the planet and cause our nukes to become a threat to other countries so that we can be invaded by foreign forces for their own safety, as it were. These are my predictions of the different ways things can go on the morning of November 4. Will we know right away who won? Honestly, I've told people the 2016 election was the last free election we'll ever have. They learned their lesson. They're never going to let us do that again. So from here on out, it's Banana Republic rigged elections. If it wasn't before, it sure will be from here on out. As far as the Democrats are concerned, that's perfectly clear that that's what they intend to do. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to willfully march to the gulag and turn yourself in? Are you going to turn your guns over to the buyback program and take your 30 pieces of silver for your betrayal of the Constitution? Are you going to continue to give up your right to freedom of speech? Are you going to continue to let hordes of black-clad, angry protesters destroy your cities, your capitals, your businesses, your ways of life? Are you going to continue to let a disease that doesn't seem to be any more deadly than the flu continue to lock down the economy until there's nothing left of this country. They're trying to make it easy to conquer us because they can either take your guns or they can convince you to sell them for bread because you're broke and can't feed your children. More than one way to skin a cat, right? I don't know. It's all pretty scary. We live in interesting times. And boy, howdy, we're all about to find out what's going to happen next. So strap yourself in because I got a feeling it's going to be Mr. Toad's Wild Ride up in here. And who knows what's going to happen in the end. I didn't give us a scenario in my predictions where things just turn out okay and it's all fine. I don't reckon we'll ever see all fine again. I don't know. Not in this generation. Maybe in 20 years we'll get this all worked out and be fine again. But right now, everything's all effed up. It's not fine at all. It's a fine mess. It's a fine mess you've gotten us into. God save our republic.